Recent revelations from the Young and the Restless suggest that Phyllis Summers is not merely circling Newman Enterprises out of curiosity or revenge, but actively positioning herself to seize it for her own gain. Yet what makes this development so volatile is that this was not the agreement she originally signed on for. There was a plan, there were terms, there were boundaries, at least in theory. What has unfolded instead is a reckless improvisation that threatens to implode under the weight of ego, impatience, and underestimation of Victor Newman. The sedating of Cain Ashby marked the turning point. It was not a calculated corporate maneuver. It was a desperate gamble disguised as strategy. Phyllis orchestrated the act, and Billy Abbott stepped into complicity afterward, whether out of ambition, misguided loyalty, or the intoxicating thrill of subversion. In the sterile light of hindsight, the move reeks of chaos rather than control. Drugging Cain was not the action of a disciplined corporate tactician. It was the act of someone who believes momentum can replace method. Victor Newman, of course, would not describe it so politely. He has built empires on discipline, patience, and ruthless calculation. To him, this trio likely appears less like strategic adversaries and more like reckless amateurs stumbling through a heist they barely understand. Viewers familiar with the slapstick absurdity of classic comedy might even see the resemblance: Cain, Phyllis, and Billy moving in chaotic synchronization, miscalculating timing, stepping on each other's intentions. There is something darkly ironic in the comparison to Moe, Larry, Curly, and even Shempa Trio, or Quartet, whose overconfidence repeatedly leads to self-inflicted disaster. Yet unlike comedy, there is no harmless reset button here. The stakes are corporate sovereignty, reputations, and potentially criminal consequences. Phyllis working independently, without fully aligning with Billy's expectations or Cain's vulnerabilities, reveals the core flaw in this scheme. She has always been fiercely intelligent, instinctive, and capable of manipulating perception. But she is also prone to emotional impulsivity when ambition and personal validation intertwine. From the summer onward, she fixated on Cain as her pathway forward. She convinced herself that he was the vehicle through which she could regain dominance, influence, and proximity to power. That self-persuasion was not purely strategic, it was psychological. Phyllis needed a narrative in which she was not sidelined, not reactive, but ascending. Cain became that narrative. The plan, at least initially, revolved around intimacy as leverage. By embedding herself in Cain's life, by displacing Lily Winters emotionally and strategically, she believed she could guide him, shape him into making decisions that benefited her. On the surface, she succeeded. Lily is no longer central in Cain's daily orbit. The immediate obstacle appears removed, yet removal is not erasure. Cain still loves Lily. Phyllis knows this. She senses it in hesitation, in nostalgia, in the quiet way his guard drops when Lily's name surfaces. That knowledge is destabilizing. Phyllis does not merely want access to power. She wants certainty. She wants to be indispensable. The realization that Cain's emotional allegiance remains divided threatens her illusion of control. If he cannot sever that attachment fully, then he cannot be fully manipulated. And if he cannot be fully manipulated, then her ascent toward Newman Enterprises becomes precarious. The sedative incident underscores how far she is willing to go when impatience overrides patience. It is one thing to cultivate influence through proximity. It is another to chemically incapacitate the very person whose trust you claim to nurture. Billy's role as accomplice complicates matters further. Billy thrives in chaos, but rarely sustains discipline. His alignment with Phyllis likely began as opportunistic an alliance forged from shared resentment toward Victor and shared ambition. Yet alliances built on resentment often fracture under pressure. Billy's conscience, pride, or simple miscalculation could become the variable that unravels everything. Victor Newman is not an executive who overlooks anomalies. He studies patterns. He anticipates betrayal before it fully forms. If he even suspects that Cain's incapacitation connects to Phyllis or Billy, retaliation will not be theatrical, it will be surgical. Victor does not simply retaliate emotionally, he dismantles infrastructure. He could expose financial irregularities, manipulate board loyalties, or orchestrate legal scrutiny that forces public reckoning. Phyllis may believe she is orchestrating a takeover, but Victor likely sees a vulnerability he can exploit. The deeper irony is that this was not the original deal. Whatever arrangement existed, whether implicit or explicit, did not include unilateral domination by Phyllis. Her decision to freelance within a fragile alliance signals mistrust. It suggests she does not fully believe Billy or Kane can deliver. Instead of consolidating strategy, she fragmented it. That fragmentation introduces risk at every level. Kane himself remains a volatile factor. Even sedated, even temporarily manipulated, he is not inherently naive. Should he discover the truth that the woman positioning herself as his ally engineered his incapacitation, the fallout would be catastrophic, not only emotionally, but legally. Trust, once betrayed at that level, transforms allies into adversaries overnight. Phyllis' greatest vulnerability has always been her need to win decisively. She does not aim for partial victory, she seeks dominance. That ambition fuels her brilliance, but also blinds her to incremental caution. Newman Enterprises is not a prize that can be snatched through improvisation. It is fortified by decades of power consolidation, loyalty networks, and Victor's unrelenting vigilance. In trying to leapfrog the original plan, Phyllis may have accelerated her own exposure. Billy's complicity ties him to potential legal ramifications. Kane's emotional entanglement with Lily leaves a door open that Phyllis cannot fully close. And Victor's watchful eye hovers over all of it. What makes this arc compelling is not merely the audacity of the attempted takeover, but the fragile egos entangled within it. Ambition without discipline is combustible. Loyalty without clarity is unstable. And when three volatile personalities converge around a corporate empire guarded by Victor Newman, the outcome is rarely elegant. Phyllis may believe she is rewriting the terms of engagement. But in Genoa City, especially when Newman Enterprises is involved, rewriting the rules often invites a counterstrike more devastating than the original gamble. Lily's absence altered the emotional battlefield more than Phyllis initially anticipated. With Lily Winters out of immediate sight, Phyllis convinced herself that she no longer needed to factor Lily into her calculations. In her mind, emotional proximity equals advantage. If Lily was no longer physically present to remind Kane Ashby of their history, then physical intimacy could fill the vacuum. Phyllis has always understood the power of chemistry, of suggestion, of shared vulnerability. She believed that, if she could anchor Kane through desire, if she could tether him through physical connection, then forward motion, corporate, strategic, emotional would inevitably follow. It was not just seduction, it was leverage. And leverage, in her worldview, is currency. But events spiraled in directions she did not fully control. The shocking belief that Lily had been kidnapped shifted Kane's perspective dramatically. Fear clarifies priorities. In moments of perceived crisis, ambition contracts and protection expands. Kane's response was immediate and telling. He instructed Amanda Sinclair to execute the transfer of Newman Enterprises back to Victor Newman. At the same time, he ordered one of his technical specialists to dismantle the controversial artificial intelligence program that had become central to the corporate power struggle. Those decisions were not romantic, they were strategic retreats. They revealed that when pressed, Kane prioritizes damage control and Lily's safety over bold expansion. This pivot occurred before Phyllis incapacitated him on the train. That timing is crucial. By the moment she chose to render him unconscious, he had already begun reversing course. In effect, she was not sedating a partner advancing her ambitions, she was neutralizing an obstacle who had chosen retreat. That distinction reframes her actions. It suggests she was no longer collaborating, she was overriding. Her freelance strategy was born not out of shared vision, but out of frustration. What followed was even more volatile, to separate agreements forged with Billy Abbott. Billy, driven by his own unresolved grievances, did not merely align with Phyllis, he layered his own agenda on top of hers. He believes the chancellor position symbolically and practically was stripped from him unjustly. He sees himself as the rightful architect of that legacy, the leader who was sidelined by circumstance rather than incompetence. That belief fuels his impatience, it also clouds his judgment. Billy's second arrangement with Phyllis reveals how recklessly he is willing to gamble. His conviction that Sally Spectra deserves to lead a media empire is not purely altruistic. It is layered with resentment toward Adam Newman. By orchestrating a scenario in which Sally would helm Newman Media, Billy achieves two objectives simultaneously, elevating someone he believes in and humiliating Adam in the process. It is a dual strike, professional and personal. Yet the elegance of that revenge fantasy masks the fragility beneath it. Newman Media is not a detached asset floating independently from Victor's influence. It is interwoven into the Newman power structure. To displace Adam is to provoke Victor. Billy may relish confrontation, but history demonstrates that direct challenges to Victor rarely end with Billy triumphant. Victor does not respond to humiliation passively, he recalibrates. He isolates vulnerabilities, he counterattacks with precision. Phyllis' independent maneuvering and Billy's layered scheming intersect in dangerous ways. She seeks dominance over Newman Enterprises. He seeks reclamation of Chancellor authority and retribution against Adam. Their goals overlap, but are not identical. When alliances are built on overlapping but divergent ambitions, fractures are inevitable. Phyllis operates from instinct and emotional urgency. Billy operates from wounded pride and competitive fire. Neither is known for sustained discipline. The destruction of the AI program adds another volatile dimension. That technology represented leverage data, predictive capacity, influence over corporate decisions. Its elimination weakens strategic positioning. Kane's decision to dismantle it signaled retreat from escalation. Phyllis' subsequent actions signaled escalation without consensus. The result is strategic dissonance. Victor Newman, watching from the periphery, will not miss these inconsistencies. To him, disunity among adversaries is opportunity. If he identifies the fracture between Billy's objectives and Phyllis' ambitions, he can exploit it. He could offer Billy a partial restoration of influence to fracture the alliance. He could expose Phyllis' role in Kane's incapacitation, triggering legal consequences that force Billy to distance himself. He could manipulate board members to isolate Sally's candidacy before it materializes. The irony is that Billy believes he is orchestrating a masterstroke. Installing Sally at Newman Media would not merely sideline Adam, it would symbolically invert Victor's favor. Adam, long the controversial son entrusted with leadership, would be replaced by his former lover under Billy's influence. It is a psychological strike as much as a corporate one. Billy imagines Victor forced to confront the humiliation of his son's displacement, but imagination is not execution. Phyllis, meanwhile, believes she is operating several moves ahead. She views Lily's absence as clearance, Kane's emotional vulnerability as opportunity, Billy's resentment as fuel. Yet she may be underestimating how quickly variables shift in Genoa City. Lily's re-emergence physically or emotionally could destabilize Kane. Amanda's legal involvement introduces documentation that could later serve as evidence. And Billy's impatience could leak information prematurely. This is not a disciplined coup. It is a cascade of improvisations layered atop one another. Each decision compounds risk. Drugging Kane introduced potential criminal liability. Negotiating to separate deals with Billy multiplies exposure. Attempting to control Newman Enterprises while simultaneously engineering Adam's professional downfall stretches focus thin. Billy's unnecessary risk lies not only in his ambition, but in his underestimation of Victor's endurance. Victor has survived betrayals far more calculated than this. He has rebuilt empires after hostile takeovers. He has sacrificed assets to protect core power. Billy's assumption that Victor will remain reactive rather than proactive may be the fatal miscalculation. If Sally becomes aware of the full context, if she discovers that her potential elevation is intertwined with manipulation, sedation, and revenge, her reaction could introduce yet another fracture. She may refuse to be a pawn in Billy's vendetta against Adam. She may demand transparency. That demand alone could destabilize the arrangement before it solidifies. In the end, what unites Phyllis and Billy is not strategic brilliance, but emotional urgency. They are both operating from places of wounded pride and unfulfilled recognition. Phyllis seeks validation through dominance. Billy seeks redemption through reclamation. Their partnership is combustible because it is fueled by ego rather than discipline. And in Genoa City, when ego collides with the fortified empire of Victor Newman, history suggests only one outcome. Someone miscalculates, someone overreaches, and someone pays a price far greater than anticipated. Kane Ashby did not stumble into this chaos by accident. He engineered the opening moves last year, and that fact is something Victor Newman has not allowed anyone to forget. Long before sedatives on trains, secret side deals, and attempted corporate overthrows, Cain made a calculated decision to surround himself with volatile allies. Loyal viewers of The Young and the Restless will remember that Cain actively recruited both Phyllis Summers and Billy Abbott into the fold of Arabesque. He did not drift into partnership with them, he pursued them. He believed he could harness their ambition without being consumed by it. That miscalculation may prove to be the original fracture line that split this entire storyline wide open. Cain's manipulation was sophisticated, even theatrical. Under the alias Aristotle Dumas, he secretly phoned Billy, enticing him with promises of restored influence and elevated stature. At the time, Billy was serving as chancellor, hungry for validation and eager to prove his capability. The call was tailored perfectly to Billy's psychology, an appeal to pride disguised as opportunity. Cain understood that Billy's greatest vulnerability was his desire to be taken seriously, to be recognized not as a reckless heir, but as a formidable leader, and Billy walked directly into the trap. Phyllis, too, was drawn into Cain's orbit through calculated flattery and strategic positioning. Cain recognized her hunger for relevance, her instinct for power dynamics, her talent for navigating chaos. Arabesque became the stage upon which he believed he could direct two of Genoa City's most combustible personalities toward a unified objective. What he underestimated was that combustible personalities do not remain subordinate indefinitely, they ignite. Victor has repeatedly emphasized in private discussions with his trusted Newman circle that Cain bears foundational responsibility for the present turmoil. While Abby Newman winters fresh from the emotional ordeal of recovering, her son remains outside those strategic conversations. Victor's inner confidants have heard the same refrain. This mess began when Cain overestimated his ability to control unstable forces. Victor does not see coincidence, he sees cause and effect. From his vantage point, Arabesque was the seed, and everything that followed: sedation, betrayal, fragmented alliances, is the harvest. Whether Cain was physically incapacitated or merely strategically sidelined does not alter Victor's long-term intent. Accountability, in Victor's lexicon, is inevitable. Yet what makes this arc particularly compelling is the possibility of temporary alignment between adversaries. Cain may have been betrayed by Phyllis and Billy, but betrayal has a way of clarifying loyalties. If he recognizes that he is no longer steering the alliance, but being undermined by it, pragmatism may override pride. An unexpected collaboration between Cain and Victor to contain Phyllis and Billy would be both ironic and dramatically potent. Two men who distrust each other deeply, bound together not by affection, but by necessity. Forming a provisional front against common enemies, this is the kind of reversal that elevates corporate intrigue into high-stakes chess. Cain, having initiated the Arabesque experiment, might see cooperation as his only path to salvaging reputation. Victor, always willing to exploit fracture lines, might calculate that neutralizing Phyllis and Billy first creates space to dismantle Cain later under more controlled circumstances. Such a partnership would not be born of forgiveness. Victor does not forgive strategic missteps lightly. Instead, it would be transactional. Cain provides intelligence details about Billy's secondary agreement involving Sally Spectra and the maneuver to displace Adam Newman at Newman Media. In exchange, Victor delays retribution, allowing Cain to reposition himself as an ally rather than a casualty. The psychological dimension of this potential twist is striking. Billy and Phyllis both believe they are operating independently, leveraging their cunning to outmaneuver Victor and Cain simultaneously. Yet, if Cain realigns with Victor, their improvisational scheme collapses under coordinated counter-strategy. Victor's discipline combined with Cain's insider knowledge could expose the sedation incident, unravel the dual agreements, and corner Billy into legal or reputational vulnerability. For Billy, this would be a devastating reversal. His gamble to reclaim prestige and humiliate Adam would instead expose him as manipulated twice, first by Cain under the Aristotle Dumas alias, and now by Phyllis' unilateral freelancing. His belief that he was orchestrating a masterstroke would dissolve into the realization that he was a piece moved across someone else's board. Phyllis, ever defiant, would likely refuse to concede immediately. Her instinct in crisis is escalation, not retreat. Yet, escalation against a united front of Victor and Cain would be perilous. Victor does not simply counterattack, he dismantles reputation systematically. Legal inquiries into the sedation could surface. Financial irregularities could be scrutinized. Board members could be reminded of where loyalty ultimately lies. Kane's redemption, if it occurs, would not be heroic but strategic. He would not be absolved of responsibility for initiating Arabesque's instability. Victor would ensure that remains clear. But by assisting in the containment of Phyllis and Billy, Kane could reposition himself as a necessary collaborator rather than an expendable liability. It would be a humbling pivot, one that forces him to acknowledge that his ambition outran his control. This potential twist also offers narrative symmetry. The man who set the trap under a false identity could now be instrumental in exposing those who believed they were outmaneuvering him. The empire that appeared vulnerable might reveal itself to be fortified by adaptability. And the chaos unleashed by ego-driven improvisation could culminate in an alliance born not of trust, but of mutual calculation. In the world of Genoa City, power rarely shifts cleanly. It lurches, recoils, and reconfigures. Kane's initial decision to recruit volatile allies ignited the current inferno. Victor's insistence on accountability underscores that origin. Yet the most compelling climax may emerge not from punishment alone, but from an unexpected coalition. Victor and Kane standing shoulder to shoulder, not as friends, but as tacticians determined to remind Phyllis and Billy that ambition without discipline is a flame easily extinguished by those who have mastered the art of controlled fire.